what advice would you give to aspiring authors? And this is from Annika, because hi, Annika.
Hi, Annika. Hello. Advice for aspiring authors. I've got two. So one is don't be afraid to write something bad. And this is advice that I have to keep reminding myself of constantly. And this was a huge stumbling block for me early on because I would come up with an idea and I would get excited and I would write 3 chapters and it wouldn't look like the way it looked in my head. So I would go back, I would stop and go back and revise it and revise it and revise it and revise it and just get stuck in this wheel of revising until I got tired of that story and would just be like, well, I guess it's not that good of an idea. And then I would see some other shiny idea and I would run off and write 3 chapters and do the same thing over and over. And I did this like 50 times before I finally was like, I just have to finish something. And NaNoWriMo helped me with that a lot. NaNoWriMo was coming up soon on November 1st. So National Novel Writing Month, it's where you write 50,000 words without going back and editing. So I finally did NaNoWriMo for one of my ideas and finished it. And it was terrible, but I finished it. And I think that's a really important lesson for aspiring writers. Quantity over quality, like get it done, get the words out. You can't edit something that doesn't exist. You can't make it better if it's not there. Once you have a bad first draft down, you can rip it up, you can take out chapters, you can put chapters in, you can mess with it however you need to. But you got to have that first draft first to do anything with it. And I still have to remind myself of this, that my first draft is going to be bad, and that's okay. Every single one of my first drafts has been bad. My current first draft of Skyhunter 2 is terrible, and I hate writing first drafts. I had to drag myself through the mud to finish it. But you finish it, and then the magic happens, at least for me. I have some writer friends who are able to write good first drafts, but I am not one of those people. Most of the people I know are not those people. You can't work with something that doesn't exist. And the other piece of advice is more of like a personal self-care thing. And it's that, especially when you're an aspiring writer going on submission, you are not your book. It's a hard thing to separate because you can't help but put your heart into your book. And all of our books are a little piece of our hearts. But at the same time, it's just a book. And it can be really hard to get rejections because it feels like you are the one being rejected like that. But the rejections are not for you as a person. You as a person are wonderful and perfect and don't change anything. The rejection is for this one piece of work that you have created. And it has no say in what your worth is as a human. It is still just a book, even though it is a piece of your heart. So that's something that I have to remind myself of constantly as well, that myself and my book are 2 separate entities. So I hope that helps, and I wish all aspiring writers all the best. It's the best and most challenging thing in the world.
So now, do you write out longhand or do you type on the computer?
I type on the computer for the most part. I do have a notebook that I keep, notes in. So I will write. I will write in a notebook with notes, but the actual story I will type out by hand.
So from Evelyn, we have, what are your favorite and least favorite tropes?
My favorite and least favorite tropes. Well, I don't think I have a least favorite trope because I like tropes a lot. And I think any trope can be done right in the right hands. So I don't have a least favorite trope. My favorite trope, in case this wasn't obvious, I really love hate to love romances. I think they're super fun. I love it when 2 characters are just like, I can't stand you, I hate everything about you, we are mortal enemies, and then they end up falling in love. I think that's super fun. And I love thieves with a heart of gold, like the Robin Hood type characters. I just have the softest spot for those types of characters who are just, down on their luck, on the fringe of society, but are still snarky and cheerful and funny and are willing to walk the line of the law for the sake of, for the good of humanity. I love those types of characters. So those are 2 of my favorites.
So Amina writes, Legend and Skyhunter are both enemies to lovers. Is there one you hope to explore in a future book?
Is there one that I hope to explore in a future book? I mean, Skyhunter 2 is the culmination of Talon and Red's arc. So that's kind of what's filling my time these days. And as for Day and June, I think their arc is pretty much finished with the end of Rebel. But having said that, I don't feel like I'm great at keeping that promise. So we'll see. If I explore something else in those universes, I think it will not be featuring the same people. So if I write something that's set in the legend world again, it probably won't be about Day and June. It might be about something they know or you know, some other person in that world, but it won't actually be about them. And I'm not really sure about Talon and Red yet, just because that series is still ongoing. So we'll see how that one turns out.
So from Ebony, what's the best advice you have for the editing process?
My best advice for the editing process. I get a lot of my editing process from my editor, who I have worked with since Legend. She is amazing and wonderful, and is the best editor I've ever worked with. And so I learned a lot from her. And the way that she structures her revision letters for me is how I now structure revisions for myself. And the way that she does it is she breaks it down into these broad categories. And I'm talking about like the first revision, the first big one. She will break it down into 3 major categories, and it'll be something like characters. So she'll say Talon as a standalone character. I wish I knew more about this of Talon, or why does she react like this in these situations? I feel like we could bring out her personality more here. And she'll kind of break down specific scenes where she feels like that could happen. And then she'll go into character relationships, and she'll say Talon with Red. You know, when Talon is with Red, I would love to see more of the romantic sparks early on, you know, as you're drafting. Or why do Talon and Red react in this way to each other in this moment? And she'll kind of break it down that way. And then she'll move on to world building. So she'll say something like Mara as a kingdom. You know, how did this world come to be? Could we get a little bit more information early on about how the ruins that are scattered throughout the landscape came to be? Is there a reason why they're there? Can we find out more about the economy of Mara? And she'll break it out like that. And then she'll say, then it becomes like plot logistics. So things like the arc feels a little bit too loose in the beginning, or it feels a little bit too rushed towards the end. Can we smooth out the arc a little bit? And so she'll have these kind of big points broken down by category.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I look at that, it can be kind of overwhelming to think about all the things that need to change for the book, but it helps me when I just zone in on one thing. So for that week, I might just be like, this week I am just focused on Talon as a character, and I don't care about anything else. And I'm just going in and fixing scenes, building up Talon's character. And then this week I am just focused on the world building, and I am going to just do this. So it helps me to break it down into those chunks. And it helps that my editor breaks it down into those chunks for me early on. So now, you know, before I turn my first drafts into my editor, I tend to run myself through a revision of my own.
Oh, yeah.
So I will do that. Now I will go in and kind of I know the big categories I need to, you know, fix, and I will write down what I think needs fixing in each of those big categories. And then I will go in piece by piece and go, and then try not to think too much about how much is left to do, because at some point halfway through going through those big chunks, I realize that I'm over halfway done, and I get like the momentum to go through and finish the rest of it. So that's kind of how I tackle it, and it helps to just break it down into smaller steps.